WTMA. It's Charlie James on 1250 WTMA.
And good morning to you. It's 8:18, 18 minutes past 8 o'clock right here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. Please welcome in studio Congressman Mark Sanford. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning back to you. I'm relieved. I wasn't stuck on one side of the river versus the other this morning.
Now, you were with Ben Carson yesterday. How'd that event go?
It was most interesting.
Yeah.
There was a big crowd there. We do office hours around the district, and they're very informal. It's just a chance to visit with folks, and the best laid of plans can go awry when the bridge goes out.
Yeah.
And so a number of different snafus, but all's well, I guess it ends well. A little bit shorter than we would have liked, a little bit less visiting than we would have liked, but all's well that ends well.
Did he make his flight? Because I know he had to get out.
I don't think there's any way in the world he made it. I've not spoken to him this morning.
So, all right, Washington, you and I were just talking a little bit off air. Half the things that you guys do up there in Washington are damned if you do and damned if you don't. Let's talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership that's going on and the vote on that. A lot of people are saying this is just another bill that is going to take jobs away from Americans. It's going to open us up to a lot of foreign competition. How do you feel about that? What's that vote going to be like?
It's going to be a tough vote.
Yeah.
What they did over on the Senate side, because they didn't want to vote on it twice, is they combined what's called TPA with TPP.
Mm-hmm.
TPP being the actual trade deal, basically for the Southeast Asia, a number of countries down that way, excluding China.
Right.
TPA being basically the authority for negotiating the deal.
Yeah.
So what'll come up in the House is TPA. What's interesting about TPA is it's been given basically to every president since Roosevelt, since America has been negotiating big trade deals post World War II.
Right.
They're very, very important in terms of lowering tariffs. So I think it'd be an automatic, if you want to call it that, as a Republican. Historically, most Democrats have voted against it. Most Republicans have voted for it. The catch in this one is this. Somebody comes up to you and says, let me get this right. You say that the president did any number of things that you believe to be unconstitutional.
Right.
You think he's operated outside the bounds of authority, for instance, on immigration.
Right.
You don't trust him to negotiate a deal on Iran, but you want to give him negotiating authority to go out and negotiate a trade deal.
Right, yeah.
I mean, so it's going to be an interestingly squeezed vote on the House side. That's why the Speaker said we don't have the votes on the Republican side to do this.
Right.
Democrats had better come up with some votes, or this thing's going south. Presently, they don't have the votes. I think if you look at how important trade is to the Tri-County area, to our state, whether that's with BMWs going in and out,
or
whether that's soon to be Volvos or Boeing airplanes, it's very, very important, but it's going to be a very tough vote.
All right, talking about the Speaker of the House, a lot of people are saying, well, here's Mark Sanford. He's always siding up with the establishment, always siding up with Boehner. How do you address people that say that?
Look at my voting record.
Yeah,
I think that if there's anybody who's ever been non-establishment, it's me, and that's for good and for worse. So it's been interesting in going back. Oftentimes it's just me and Ron Paul that would vote no on any number of different items. Now there's actually a group of folks that vote in that direction. So if you look at a Jim Jordan out of the Midwest, or a Cynthia Lummis out of Wyoming, or Tom Massey out of Kentucky, or Justin Amash, there's actually a caucus. Anyway, they asked me to join that caucus.
Right.
And they're sort of the rebels in the House, but for the right reasons, and that is, how do you push forward and advance liberty, very much at times against where establishment or leadership would want to come from. Most recently, I'd give you an example on this, is that we parted ways with leadership and the establishment on this notion of electronic surveillance within NSA and what's called the Patriot Act. And so a number of us, about 50 of us, voted against it. The establishment voted for it. But I think that one of the hallmarks of liberty is civil liberty. And at times that's getting tossed out the side window up in Washington.
Right.
As, there's been really a 2,000-year-old debate between security and freedom.
Right.
Historically, those civilizations that have basically chosen security over freedom have lost both. There's a great quote by Governor Edward Gibbons back in 1776, wrote a book on the fall of the Romans. He actually looks back to the fall of Athens, and the quote runs something along the lines of, in the end, more than they wanted freedom, they wanted security, and as a consequence lost it all.
Well, they've lost both.
Important debate.
You initially co-sponsored the USA Freedom Act, and now you're going to be, the vote is against it.
Correct.
Why is that? What changes were made in that act that made you change your mind?
Well, I did the same thing as Justin Amash, many others who I think are on the pro-liberty side of the equation. When they didn't get rid of what's called Section 215, the courts came out against Section 215. Section 215 is these sort of mega data searches with broad numbers of different phone numbers in them. But it's a warrantless search. The Fourth Amendment was all about British soldiers coming into somebody's house, rummaging around long enough till eventually they found something to charge you with.
Yeah.
And that's, in essence, what's going on with these searches. If you go look, if I looked everywhere in your life, sooner or later we could find some infraction to some code or some law or some regulation.
That would take about 30 seconds.
Okay. and then they'd say, okay, we're going to charge you with whatever. That's backward. That's a warrantless search.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it's for that reason that they, leadership inserted back in a thing that deals with that, and as a consequence, 50 of us bolted on it.
We're talking with Congressman Mark Sanford this morning in studio, and Congressman, let's talk a little bit about the budget, the 2016 budget that we're looking at. What about Obama's budget proposal for 2016? You say it's unsound in the short and the long term, raises taxes on spending, and does little to control the mandatory spending that is driving our national debt. How can we get our spending under control?
That's the $94 question.
Yeah.
That's the reason I went back to Washington. If we don't get the numbers right, our civilization will risk collapse.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. This is not something in our kids' or our grandkids' time. You go out about 10 years, and we're only going to have enough money for interest and entitlements and nothing else.
And that's it.
And so we can have debates on highway funding, defense spending, go down all the categories of government, but it's all really an academic exercise unless we get our numbers right. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was asked, when asked, what is the most significant threat to the United States of America? He didn't answer what's going on in the Middle East. He didn't answer China. His answer was the American debt. And we have a day of reckoning that's coming our way. So is there any magic formula? No. Jefferson talked about how eternal vigilance was the price of liberty. I mean, it requires every one of us making noise, pushing where we can to say, no, we don't need more of this, that, and whatever. And you talk to most working folks out there, largely they want to be left alone by government.
Exactly. Yeah, we do.
I mean, that's what they really want. What I would say is, as to the president's budget, right now we're running roughly structural $500 billion deficits. I mean, can you get your arms around $500 billion?
Not even, no.
And what his budget did was say, okay, we'll leave that in place and we'll basically grow to $1.1 trillion annual deficits, which is a place we weren't that long. We're at not that long ago. And so doesn't even address the deficit. Adds another $8 trillion in new debt, adds another $2 trillion in new taxes, basically just punts on the issue of trying to get our arms around spending. Here's a very, very interesting statistic. It took us 200 years of civilization to get to $5 trillion in debt.
Right. 200
years. During the Bush years, and I'm not blaming him, I'm not trying to blame anybody, but during those 8 years,
right,
the last Bush presidency, we went from $5 to $10 trillion in national debt. And in fairness, that's when 2008, 2009 economic slowdown. But the debt doubled. It's going to double again during this next 8 years, during the Obama presidency. going from $10 to $20 trillion. We're at 18 right now.
That's amazing. Amazing.
You talk about geometric growth and a problem. It's unbelievable to look at the numbers.
All right, we got. I know you're short on time, but you want to take a call real quick?
Sure,
Can we talk
glad
to
to.
Joe
Yes, sir.
west of the Ashley? If you'll put your
Yes, sir.
headphones on there, we'll talk to Joe. Joe's been waiting patiently. Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Yes, I wanted to ask Congressman Sanford, with the investigations going on by the Judicial Department in the different police areas where they have controversies where the police shooting mostly black African civilians, do you see a policy of the Obama administration where they're literally trying to federalize the police, so where we have just one police force, like in England and France?
Yeah. What about a national police force? A lot of people saying that's what Sharpton is pushing for, and a lot of people like that. Did you any of that crossing your on your radar screen?
I think that there is certainly escalation at the federal level and a push to expand on all kinds of different fronts. I think that you look at, alcohol, firearm, ATF. A lot of people were quite concerned with the number of rounds, for instance, that they had purchased some time ago, and saying what's going on here. So I'd say that there's a general bias in that direction. There hasn't been a specific proposal legislatively to that end. But I think, again, it goes back to what I was just talking about a moment ago. You talk about eternal vigilance being the price of liberty. There's so many areas wherein the federal government is trying to usurp local authority. And the founding fathers were so deliberate in dissecting power, and they broke it laterally across, obviously, a judicial, legislative, and executive branch. But they also broke it vertically so that you have a federal government, but you also had a state and a local government, and at times that concept is forgotten in Washington.
Exactly. All right, I know you're short on time. Thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks for letting me join you. Good to see you again.
We will talk to you very soon. Congressman Mark Sanford right here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA, WTMA.com.